from Mickey and from me, I have to tell you, I have just seen the most entertaining video that Domino's Pizza did of me and Mickey. And Mickey has turned out to be the star of the show. You know what they used to say? Never, never appear in a movie with children or animals. Well, I am happy to appear with Mickey because I don't mind if she steals all my thunder. Eh, Mix? You're welcome to steal as much thunder as you possibly can. Today, we are going to have a little bit more levity than we had the other day, because I can't take too much of the heavy-duty stuff. I find it onerous. So, without further ado, we're going to plunge right in, and we are going to have, hopefully, a really good time. The first one comes from, I don't know why the name has been eliminated, but it has. So I'm afraid I don't know who this is from. Anyway, it says, Dear Lady C, I just heard that the Harkles are planning to renew, in quotation marks, their vows in California. They apparently want something without the pomp and circumstance the first wedding had. Oh, such simple, sweet and lovely and innocent people. And nobody simpler, sweeter and more innocent than Megsy baby. In addition, they want the wedding done their way, without the firm dictating everything. Oh, thank God we're having laughs today. Am I crazy? No, you're not, sweetie pie. No, you're not. Firstly, did they not have the wedding just as they wanted? So I believe, so everybody said. If I seem to recall correctly, and I know I'm not incorrect, what Meghan wants, Meghan gets, Harry kept on saying, to the annoyance of everybody. So, if I may stop interrupting myself, Mickey, bite Mummy if she interrupts herself again. You could see in the pictures, oh sorry, firstly, did they not have the wedding just as they wanted? Guests, black preacher, gospel choir, etc. You could see in the pictures Meghan loved big block capitals, all the pomp surrounding her. Secondly, if they wanted a different kind of wedding, smaller, low-key. If they wanted, could they not have had it? Will they be paying back the taxpayers for the first wedding? Mix, catch that pig, it's flying. I think we know the answer to that one. Lady C, if you have any information, please share. Also share what you think of this news. I'm gobsmacked in Canada. You know, the only way that Harry and Meghan can keep themselves at the forefront of the news is to misinform and inform, and to have this cocktail of information and misinformation and speculation that they purvey on a daily basis. So, of course, Meghan is a denialist, and she needs to refute the fact that she is relentlessly and ruthlessly ambitious. So, of course, she's going to need to keep on practicing her lines. I'm just a sweet and simple little girl, just an ordinary little girl, just in love with an ordinary billionaire or millionaire who I'm going to turn into a billionaire. It's denialism. Will it happen if they can make mileage out of it I think it actually is a pretty good idea for content for their Netflix. You know, I think it's very, very good content. Look at how simple we are. We are so in love. We just love each other so madly. The last time we did it for the public, now we're doing it for ourselves. But hang on a second, didn't she say they got married 3 days before they got married? Mix, refresh my memory. Didn't she say they got married 3 days before they got married? So now this is going to be the third wedding ceremony. Oh, God. The woman is an actress. She's writing, starring in, directing, and producing the Harry and Meghan Truman Show. Anything can happen, except authenticity. They can't be authentic. She just can't be authentic because she has to declare she's authentic so often that she just can't be authentic, because people who are authentic don't have to declare it constantly. And also, she wouldn't know authenticity if it slapped her across the face. Ruby Nibs said, question for Lady C. Amid Scabies has tweeted that he's going around to bookshops signing his books. He claims they aren't having book signings these days, so he just pops in and pulls his books off the shelves and signs them. These signed copies cannot be returned to the distributor. Is that correct? That means the shops must offload them. And when there are 2 authors credited, is it normal for only one to autograph the books? What are your thoughts on Scabies' form of book tour? Don't hold back. Thanks for the encouragement, my dear. You know how reticent I am normally. You do. I can see you do. And you're encouraging me to step up to the plate and not hold back. Well, I won't. I actually checked with my publisher, because the old time rule was once the author had signed a book, it couldn't be returned. It was an absolutely sure way of making sure that the bookseller got stuck with unsold copies. But I recall Hope Dellon telling me about 10 or 12 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago, that custom had changed, certainly in America. Because, of course, authors got wise to the fact that they could stick the booksellers with the books. And booksellers got wise to the fact that they were not prepared to be stuck with unsold books. I asked my publisher, and he didn't know the answer. And he was going to get in touch with the distributors. And at the time of answering the question, I still don't know the answer. But all I can say is, if you sign a book and you do so in the knowledge that you're sticking the bookseller with an unsold signed copy, that would hardly be cricket, would it? Or for you Americans who might not know what that means, it would not be playing the game with a straight bat, would it? Also, you do have to have a pretty large ego to go around, and also not very much else to do. You can't have a very busy life. if you're busy going around to bookstores, pulling out books off bookshelves, signing them and sticking them back. I mean, it's almost pathetic. In fact, it isn't almost, it is pathetic. I wish I had that amount of time. God, you couldn't make, you know, the problem with some of these people is you just can't make it up. They're just so ridiculous and it's all so dreadful. It's one form of fecal matter flowing into a clean pond after another. BC says, I was wondering, if Harry does divorce and remarry, what happens to the Duchess of Sussex title? Fergie kept her title despite divorcing Andrew. Would Meghan keep hers as well? Well, my dear, may I be so bold as to remind you that I'm stuck with being Lady Colin Campbell 40-something years after divorcing the jerk, notwithstanding the fact that I actually had given it up. I had elected to give it up, announced it in the Times under the court circular, and I was manipulated into using it, and I thought temporarily, and 46 years later, I'm still stuck with it. Not that I am going to complain. I don't believe in complaining about things that are really something that other people would find desirable. So, although I have to say, as those of you who've read my autobiography will know, I went out of my way to return to my maiden name. However, everything doesn't work out the way you plan. Sarah, Duchess of York, is still quite correct. The Sarah, Duchess of York. She will remain Sarah, Duchess of York until she remarries. And should she remarry Prince Andrew, she will then again become Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. If Meghan and Harry get divorced, Meghan will become Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. She will remain Meghan, Duchess of Sussex until she remarries, at which point she will become Mrs. Bill Gates? Mrs. What's that other one's name? Oh, Elon Musk. Mrs. Elon Musk. Oh, maybe even Mrs. George Soros. Who knows? Maybe even Mrs. George Soros, if he doesn't depart this mortal coil before the divorce. But yes, she will remain Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, with full rights to use the name until she remarries, at which point she will lose the right to remain Meghan, Duchess of Sussex by custom, but not by regulation. Because the rule is a woman of superior rank does not have to relinquish that rank upon marriage. And for instance, Randolph Churchill's widow, Lady Randolph Churchill, Winston Churchill's mother, reverted after she divorced George Cornwallis West and married her third husband to being Lady Randolph Churchill. It's not the custom nowadays in England, but under Scottish law, a woman with a Scottish title, no matter how many times she's remarried, doesn't have to give up her title. And in the olden days, no woman, irrespective of how many times she married, surrendered her title. So Meghan, with her respect for tradition and custom, I wouldn't be surprised if we have, oh, my dear, do meet Mr. Bill Gates and his wife Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. More unlikely things have happened. Maria Litchfield says, Dear Lady C, if Meghan divorces Harry, will she lose her title of Duchess? I've just covered it, so the answer is no. Ms. KK909 says, love you and your channel. Thank you very much. I'm delighted that you do. It's so educational and entertaining on so many levels, and often funny as well. Thanks. That's my aim. I'm glad you think I'm succeeding. Diana and Dodi died because they were not wearing seatbelts in a wreck that otherwise was survivable. May I cut you right there before continuing? Dodi would have died whether he had on a seatbelt or not. The physical evidence is when the car hit the 13th column, where it hit, the engine ricocheted into Henri Paul and Dodi Fayed, both of whom were crushed by the impact of the engine crashing in onto them. Both of them died instantly. Their spines were snapped by the impact. Dodi would never have survived that crash, whether he had on a seatbelt or not. Diana, on the other hand, would have, because those few feet made a huge difference. And indeed, the bodyguard in the front, Trevor Rees-Jones, he survived. So, to resume the question, even if Harry believed the conspiracy theories that the firm was trying to take out Diana, if she had been wearing a seatbelt, she would have missed the bullet. Do you think that Harry is unable to come to terms with feeling angry at his sainted mother, and so has misdirected that anger onto the British royal family? Every mad, bad, drinking, drugging lad I've ever known, females included, I'm glad you're so unsexist, has had a big problem with some kind of unresolved anger. He can't bring himself to say, damn, mummy, how could you have been so stupid and careless to risk everything leaving me like this? He can't forgive her and move on unless he realizes he's angry at her. I would greatly value your opinion. Thank you, and kisses to Mickey. Mickey, come and get kisses. Come on, get a kiss, get a kiss, get a kiss. Get a kiss. Kisses for Mickey. I think that's a really very well considered, I'm sorry, I've got Mickey's hair on my lips now. I think that's a very well considered observation. Harry was an angry little boy long before his mother died. But he would be unnatural. Anybody would be unnatural if they didn't have a degree of anger directed to their parent in a situation like that. That doesn't say that the anger should override everything. It's natural. The fact that Harry is an angry person would actually mean that it would be quite possible that he would be angry even if there wasn't cause. But the fact that there is cause could cause him guilt. I think what would actually cause him even greater guilt than anger in that situation would be anger directed at himself, because the day before Diana died, when she phoned the children, he brushed her off. He didn't want to speak to her. He was busy frying other fish. That, I would imagine, would be cause for greater guilt. Of course, it's all speculation. Nobody will ever know. Maybe not even Harry. Certainly, judging off the degree of insight he shows, one has to question whether he will ever develop sufficient insight as to say mea culpa and embrace the fact that his perfectly natural and ordinary feelings, what's unhealthy about them isn't that they existed initially, but that he has not acknowledged their validity and left them in their proper space. Vivian Anderson says, Lady C, did you know Lady Rothermere, or Bubbles Rothermere as she was known, and what was she like? Yes, I did know Pat. I never called her Bubbles. She did not like being called Bubbles. I first met Pat and Vere at Lady Sarah Spencer Churchill's house Content in Jamaica in December 1973. Those of you who are old enough and British will remember that in December 1973, Britain was subjected to 3-day weeks, and the electricity was cut off, and there was no heating and no electricity for much of the time. I hate to confess, but after putting up with this for however many weeks, and I was due to go to New York and Jamaica for Christmas, I simply decamped early. And I left and went to Sarah's house on East 72nd Street. Then I went on to Jamaica, and I was staying with my parents. And I also went and stayed with Sarah. And I met Vere and Pat. And I remember her as if it were yesterday. She had on an Empire line dress, long. In those days, even in casual situations, women wore long dresses at dinner. The men would wear what was then called a bush jacket, open-necked shirts, usually cotton or linen, something smart but something casual. Some men would wear suits, but many men didn't. Vere wore a suit, but Pat wore a fairly lightweight cotton Empire line dress. She was a pretty woman. She had ringlets. I used to call her Big Bo Peep because she had the same hairdo as Little Bo Peep, except she was not a little girl. But she dressed as if she were a big Little Bo Peep, so I used to call her Big Bo Peep. And I liked her very much, I have to say, initially. And I liked Vere and always did like Vere. We got along like a house on fire. The conversation revolved around the 3-day week in England and all that was going on in terms of the strikes, etc. And Pat was very much aligning herself with the workers and, virtue signaling at how much of a bleeding heart she had. Vere took a rather more considered view and thought that the unions were going to destroy the country if they were allowed to continue to grind the country to a halt the way they had been doing for decades at that point. And in fact, Vere turned out to be right. And that's why Mrs. Thatcher was voted in 6 years later. And she changed the laws that prevented the unions from grinding the country to a halt and have everybody at their mercy. Fast forward, I'm in England a few months later, and I am at Stanley Vaughan's flat in Albany, and Pat shows up. She has just been to the Earl's Court exhibition, which, if I recall correctly, was sponsored by Associated Newspapers, complaining bitterly about how she had to show Princess Margaret around. And what a pain Princess Margaret was, and what a terrible pain it was that she had to execute these onerous duties as the wife of the proprietor of Associated Newspapers. In those days, Vere was not Lord Rothermere. His father was still alive, so he was still the Honourable Vere Harmsworth. Well, as soon as Pat's back was turned, Stanley said, "Typical Pat. She has to boast about all of her connections." He said, "You don't for a second believe that she's not loving every minute of it, do you?" That was Pat. That was Pat. And fast forward. Well, I won't fast forward. I'll actually come off me and I'll come on to what she was like more generally. I used to see her quite a lot socially. I met her daughter Sarah Brooks from her first marriage, who I absolutely adored and still do. I very seldom see her nowadays, but she is a capital girl. She's really lovely. I met Jonathan as well. When he was a little boy, I used to sometimes go to parties at the flat at Eaton Square. Vere and Pat were effectively leading completely separate lives. He lived in Paris and he was in love with the present Dowager Lady Rothermere, who I have met and who is extremely elegant and she's Japanese and she is very glamorous and impeccably turned out. And she was everything Pat wasn't. Pat was very flamboyant. Pat was rather erratic. Pat didn't get up until late in the afternoon and turned night into day. She could be really sweet and witty and entertaining. But I'll tell you, if she knew that Vere liked you, she absolutely had it in for you. And I remember there was an incident at a party that Hetty Simpson had. Hetty, these are names that most of you will not know about. Hetty Simpson was Mrs. Leonard Simpson. She was a great socialite. She was, her husband owned Simpson's Piccadilly, the famous store. And Hetty was a great, great gal. I just loved Hetty. She reminded me of my grandmother. She was very spirited. And Hetty had Vere and Pat at one of her parties. She owned and lived in Winston Churchill's house on Hyde Park Gate, if I remember correctly, opposite the park, Hyde Park. And you entered, and then there you went off slightly, and there was a drawing room that dropped down a floor. So the drawing room was the ceiling was 2 floors up, so to speak. And when I arrived, Vere and Pat were downstairs in the drawing room. And as I arrived at the landing, Vere's eye caught mine. And he'd always liked me and I liked him. Just on a human basis. There was anything at all. And he waved at me. And I waved back. When we were leaving and saying goodbye. And I went up to say goodbye to them. Pat literally hissed at me like... And then for the next several months, every time I saw her, she'd hiss at me. And then she forgot that, or enough time had elapsed, and she realized that Vere wasn't going to run off with me. And she was back to normal, which said something about her level of insecurity and self-protectiveness. Because, I mean, she had her beaux and her love interests, and he had Mako, and everybody knew it. So it was ridiculous. But anyway, that was Pat. She used to wear a lot of Christian Lacroix, and I mean, all these elaborate little girl dresses. She loved little girl dresses. And towards the end of her life, she always wore sneakers. So she'd have these tremendously glamorous, glitzy, metallic, heavily embroidered evening dresses with, wait for it, sneakers. And the hair, endless ringlets. I liked her. She was a character. But let me tell you, if she thought that Vere liked you, you were in for it for months at a time. Colleen Graham says, Lady C, then she gives me a very nice compliment, which I will omit from reading out. Colleen Graham, if you object, let me know in the comments. And next time I will read out a compliment, okay? But it's too nice for me to read out. Accurate list of royal women and American first ladies and their great fashion sense. Please do not forget the young and lovely Catherine, Duchess of Kent. Here in the USA, I always looked forward to and well remember her handing out the prizes at Wimbledon. Nancy Reagan was a little bit Hollywood, but well dressed as well, I think. And what do I think? I agree. I actually kicked myself after giving the list of first ladies that I had and royals that I had forgotten the Duchess of Kent, because she was always beautifully turned out, very immaculate, stylish, chic, impactful without being vulgar, just wonderful, lovely looking woman, and dressed magnificently. Nancy Reagan was a little bit Hollywood, but she also dressed well. She adored Adolfo, and Adolfo's clothes were absolutely wonderful. I mean, Adolfo he actually took over in some ways in evening wear from Norman Norell. Now, many of you will have no idea who Norman Norell was, but Norman Norell was the Molyneux of America. He was the most wonderful couturier. His mantra was, a woman can never be simply enough dressed in the day and glamorously enough dressed in the evening. And wow, did he make sure that whether you were simply dressed in the day or kapow dressed in the evening, you always looked magnificent. Jean Nog says, Lady C, I love your thinking philosophies and on what fashion is appropriate for royalty or otherwise sensible and well put together people to wear. Maybe I'm hopelessly old-fashioned at age 69. I'm from the United States, where it seems the younger generation all want to have tattoos. I'm wondering whether this where this is all coming from, and can we expect to see the younger generation of royals wanting tattoos also? I try to be open-minded, but on this issue I cannot be. Do you have an opinion on whether or not tattoos are acceptable, since we are supposedly in open-minded times now? I definitely have an opinion on it. I think a discreet little tattoo somewhere that is not constantly and ordinarily visible is just about acceptable. Everything else, I think, is an abomination. I think it is physical disfigurement. How people can turn their bodies into poor art and therefore walk around as if they are embodied walls with rubbish paintings on them is beyond me. I think it is unsightly. I think it is disfiguring. I think it has no merit. And I'll tell you who I blame to a large extent. David Beckham. David Beckham is a good-looking guy. David Beckham was, as we all know, from a very ordinary background. One could hardly have said he was from a sophisticated world, although he and his wife have ended up being very sophisticated. He turned his body into a very bad wall with tattoos everywhere. Disgusting. And because he was a huge star, and he was also playing the working class drum, which I have to tell you, I think working class people have wonderful values sometimes and can be wonderful people. But not in all things. And the body art where you actually end up becoming a walking, talking canvas started out as a working class declaration. The linguistic equivalent is dropping your H's. it's always undesirable. It's not the mark of an evolved or educated or sophisticated person. There was a rebelliousness to it, a defiance, a breach of convention. No, I can be pretty unconventional as well. But disfigure yourself to prove a point? What is the point? It's ridiculous. I'm dead against it. My children know I'm dead against it. Fortunately, they understand that if they want to have a tattoo somewhere discreet, that's fine. But for them to disfigure themselves, they have too much self-respect. And thank God for that, because I think it is so awful when you see nice looking young people having disfigured themselves. They has, to wrap this up in as non-contentious a way as possible, it has no merit whatsoever. You know, when I came out of the jungle, I met in Tesco a woman who told me that her brother, not a bad photograph either, of my face, and had tattooed it onto his leg. It actually was a very good likeness because it ended up being in all of the newspapers. Well, I told her, I'm sorry, I said, you know, I really don't think that I would want anybody to be tattooing my image anywhere on their body. I said, you know, I don't mean to be unappreciative. I said, but really, I think it's not something that I go along with. It certainly wasn't and never will be. So, to come off the subject, Georgie Sinclair says, Jackie O. Kennedy's pink suit was a Chanel knockoff. And Stephanie Green says, Lady C, pardon me for correcting you, but I know you are fastidious about facts, as I am, and would like to be advised. Mrs. Kennedy's suit was a Chanel copy by Chez Ninon. Thank you very much. I didn't know it was a knockoff. Thanks to both of you. And to everybody else who mentioned it, because several of you did. Well, at least it was made in America. So that's to the good. Charmaine Powell says, wasn't Oleg Cassini in love with Princess Grace? And several other people didn't only ask the same question, but wanted to know if it was true that she regretted not marrying Oleg Cassini and marrying Prince Rainier instead. No, she did not regret marrying Prince Rainier and not marrying Oleg Cassini. He regretted that she escaped through his fingers. And they were engaged. They weren't just in love, they had an affair and they were engaged. The problem was Oleg Cassini had been married twice before, and to two actresses, one of whom, his second wife, was a huge star at the time, called Gene Tierney. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. I think it's called Laura. It's a fabulous movie, and she was ravishingly beautiful. And I actually remember reading her memoirs many years ago, because she went insane. And she periodically kept on going insane. And she made the point that her last husband loved her whether she was sane or mad, because she was sometimes sane and sometimes mad. And what happened with her was a great tragedy, genuine human tragedy, that actually Agatha Christie even wrote a book about, called The Mirror Cracked, or The Cracked Mirror, one or the other. Elizabeth Taylor did a movie on it towards the end of her career. It's about the Gene Tierney story, which was when Gene Tierney was pregnant, she went to promote some movie or something, and she met somebody who and didn't know that they had German measles, and her child was born impaired. It drove her over the edge. Years later, she was at something, and the woman came up to her and told her, introduced herself, and proudly said to her, obviously not knowing the terrible consequences, "Oh, Miss Tierney, I love you so much. I'm such a fan of yours that, you know, I saw you at such and such a place. I got out of my sick bed even though I had German measles." That immediately flipped her into the hospital. Can you imagine? She never got over it. Grace Kelly, had she married Oleg Cassini, would have been in defiance of the church's rulings that you cannot be a practicing Catholic and married to a divorcee. And he was twice divorced, not once, twice. So they got engaged. They had a teensy-weensy affairette, in fact, a rather grand affair. She met Rainier. He proposed. She married him. And the rest is history. And did she regret marrying Rainier? No. She had a fabulous life. She had to pay a price for it. But in life, you have to pay a price for everything. If you're sitting down, you can't enjoy the benefits of standing up. If you're standing up, you can't enjoy the benefits of sitting down. That's as simple as that. Did she regret her choices? No, she didn't. But she understood that they had come at a price. Princess Grace was a really lovely, decent woman. And she used to say her ambition was to be remembered as having tried her best to be a good person. Doesn't that say it all? And my God, she was beautiful. I can still see her coming down the stairs at the Connaught Hotel to go to Princess Anne's the pre-nuptial ball at Buckingham Palace. Ravishingly beautiful. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell. And remember, keep the questions coming in. This isn't possible without you. God bless and goodbye.